Hello everyone and welcome to Brewed in Barnsley with your host me, Matt McGlone. Each episode I'll be joined by a well-known Barnsley personality to discuss how living here has shaped their lives. On this month's episode we're joined by cyclist and Olympic champion Ed Clancy. Welcome to the podcast, Ed.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I tell you what, it's good to be here. Always happy to be back in Barnsley, my hometown, but wasn't sure if I could bring this up, but I am a bit disappointed I haven't had a cup of tea yet.
Do you know what? I know. My first question to you is always about how you take your tea. We have a teapot, but we have no tea on the table. I thought we don't want to spill it on any cameras, you see. So, but
thanks for having me.
How do you take your tea?
It's strong, 2 or 3 sugars and a big dollop of milk.
2 or 3 sugars?
Yeah.
Is that to keep the energy levels up for you?
Exactly,
for your
yeah.
long cycle?
I'm a high energy person. You gotta, fuel the fire. Yeah.
You've cycled all the way here today as well from home first.
It's ride to work day, so a lot of our colleagues are sort of sending pictures of them and the kids around at school and so on. So it's great at Simca headquarters. Everyone's really embraced it, and hopefully there's a few people across the nation that have lent into it as well. But I think most people still know me for being the lycra clad sporting cyclist, but these days I love it as a leisure activity, love it as a commuting activity as well, and I'm sort of like pretty casually dressed today.
Well, I expected the whole lycra and the helmet kind of thing today. I thought you'd come in uniform, but we'll talk about your career a little bit later on. I think first of all we're filming it, so you said it's cycle to work day, it's Yorkshire Day today we're recording this on, and on top of that the Olympics are happening as well. And the Olympics is where I wanted to start, Ed, because, I think that's where most people will probably know you from. You've got 4 Olympic medals, I believe. I'm right in saying that, aren't I?
Yeah.
Because you've got tons of other cycling medals as well on top of that. But have you been watching much of the Paris Olympics at the moment?
Yeah, I've been really busy with, working in one capacity or another. But yeah, I've been keeping up with it, and I saw Tom Pidcock in the mountain bike, and anyone that watched that race, it was just, 10, 20 minutes in, the writing was on the wall that it was going to be super boring. Tom Pidcock was just going to turn it on, run away with it. And I hate to say it, but that puncture that he had was the best thing that could have happened to him. There was a massive panic in the pits. He lost 45 seconds, and I tell you what, he kept us guessing on that last lap. But that was just an epic last lap manoeuvre that'll be one of the all-time greats, I think. And Alex Yee, the triathlete, I know it's not cycling, but it's been great
to do. There's an
element
of cycling.
Yeah, there is, and I've been working with Al and the team. It's sort of a consultancy role over the last 3 years, and it was just great to see Al do the business yesterday, working so well with Sam Dickinson, his teammate, working together on the bikes, and that was great to see too.
Do you think, when you see things like that and people like Tom Pidcock and Al do so well, do you think back to those days of when you were at Beijing and London 2012 and think, our legacy has worked? Is that...
I do. And I think the difference really is in the size of the funnel, if that makes sense. So, if you can imagine, when I started riding a bike, or before I started riding a bike, really, we had the odd hero came along. We had Chris Boardman, 1992, Jason Quealy in the year 2000. And, I think what UK Sport did when I was a lad is they made a bigger funnel. So they tried to get cycling talent from outside the usual gene pool, which was pretty small. It was just like passed down from father to father and so on. And they went around schools trying to identify sort of raw talent, and that's how I was picked up. And then it's kind of an extension of that. So all the lads, when I was a 27-year-old man, is a strong term, in London, a lot of people saw that. A lot of people were inspired, motivated, and also by then, lottery funding, UK Sport had invested quite heavily in British sport, and there was a bigger funnel. There was more kids wanting to ride bikes, and now we're seeing the fruits of that. I think there's some super talents that have kind of
definitely
risen to the top. And I look at the standard of the junior racing, it's so high these days. Yeah.
Are those pathways easier now then for people? I mean, obviously they've got to be good. You've got to have that talent. But is it easier to get involved? I mean, you were, like I say, you were sort of scouted, if you like, at a schools event kind of thing. But is it easier to say to somebody now who, I don't know, who's listening to this, who's 11 years old and they like riding the bike, but they think, do you know what, I want to do that seriously?
Yeah, it's both a blessing and a curse for the youth of today. So the pathways are easier to see. They're quite clearly defined. You've kind of got the British cycling route, or you've got like the road racing route. And I'm not joking, there's cycling agents. Right. It's gone a little bit like football. They're picking up young lads in particular, as young as 15, 16 years old, getting on quite long-term, decent paying contracts very early on.
Right.
So from that point of view, it's easier. But wow, I'm telling you, like the level of competition and the amount of pressure on their shoulders and expectation, and
it's all your fault, that. Winning too much early.
I potentially played a part in it, but I do feel for the youth and the parents, because it's expensive as well these days, and it can be quite an alienating sport again.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it isn't a cheap sport. You don't think about it. You think, well, you should get a bike, don't you? But you don't. The quality of bikes, particularly like velodrome. How do you get into that stuff? There's not many velodromes about. You've got to travel. You've got to get that high level equipment.
It's really interesting, and like I feel really grateful that I kind of just the stars aligned for me. I don't know if we'll get into like my story, my upbringing, and where I came from, but I wasn't from a cycling family. We didn't have money. We didn't have a clue what we were doing, and I was a product of British cycling and their talent identification pathways. I had a few £100 of lottery funding to kick it off, and that was enough to get me started. Problem with today is that and I see it, and I've been recruited to work with young lads in wind tunnels that are 16, 17 years old on 15 grand bikes, preparing for junior track nationals and things like that. That's out of reach for an awful lot of people. Yeah. So, let's touch upon that then. Where you grew up, first of all. You grew up in Barnsley, didn't you? Yeah, I did, yes. I was born here in Barnsley back in 1985. And, it's great to be sat here again. But, born in Barnsley, 1985. Grew up around Barnsley, in Birchworth. I went to Springvale Primary School. And then, that was the first 5, 6, 7 years of my life, potentially. I guess like a lot of... it was a pretty working class upbringing. After parents divorced, might have just been across the border in Denby Dale. Stayed with my grandparents for a few years in their house, which I've just rode past today actually on the way in. The viaduct in Denby Dale, for those that know it. Just under there, moved school systems. And really, like, I always had a love for the bike. Yeah. It was not about...
So just sort of cycling with your mates, or did you get involved in any sort of community clubs? How did that come about then?
I mean, initially it was just playing bikes. There was no clubs, there was no aspiration. I wasn't trying to be anyone or do anything. Yeah. I just enjoyed the fun, freedom, independence. Honestly, it was like an escape from whatever it was. School life, family life. I just used to go out and have a good laugh with my pals.
And then one day, do you just get a phone call from British Cycling or UK Sport and saying, you're pretty good at this? How did that?
So the whole cycling thing, it's a funny one, yeah. Like a lot of these things, some of it's down to luck. And I think it was like that with me. Mentioned earlier, there was a fella called Jason Quealy in the year 2000. So he won a sole gold medal. And I remember watching that as a 15-year-old in the Sydney Olympics. But I had no idea of the consequences that it would bring. So I believe what British Cycling did at that point is, instead of reinvesting that money in the sort of elite side, they spent a fair bit of that money kind of like making that funnel bigger. Right, okay. So they literally bought vans that went around primary schools, secondary schools to try and find people like me that were somewhat athletic. I'd get a top 3 in the 100-metre sprint on sports day, and I do all right in the cross country, but nothing heroic. I wasn't training. They didn't actually come to, they didn't find me that way, but I knew of this talent team thing because I'd heard about it through other schools. So I went, it might have been on my 16th birthday, to the velodrome in Manchester, and went for a trial day. And you went there, probably dressed like this, you know, with your trainers on and your shorts and your t-shirt, and you sit on this bike, and then you do a 3-minute test on like a static watt bike type thing you see in a gym.
Yeah.
Did a minute test, I think, and a sprint test, height, weight, lung capacity, and then I sat there, and this is before email, so I sat there and waited for the letter to drop. And 3 or 4 weeks later, we had a letter drop through the post saying, "Congratulations, you've made the criteria to be eligible." At that point, eligible to be accepted on this talent team. It was called.
Okay.
It wasn't just me that came through this talent team. Jason Kenny, Laura Kenny, Lizzie Armstead, Ben Swift, Mark Cavendish, Geraint Thomas. Every single one of us came through this talent team. And
it's done its job then.
yeah. And then, so we were eligible, then we had to go back for an interview. And at that point, I didn't do anything remarkable. I wasn't training, wasn't racing, but I think they liked my sort of vision and drive. And they said, "What do you want to be when you're older?" And I was like, "The only thing I've ever loved is like riding a bike." And I said, if there's, even if I could just scrape a living doing this, I know it'd be something worth scraping. Yeah. And that was the start of it. I had a £600 check through the post. Yeah. And I was fast forwarded onto the junior track team, because once I did start training, I had a coach and a bit of a mentor, and like literally 600 quid in my pocket to like go to a few races. Yeah, that was the start of it. Yeah. And I was lucky that I had, my stepdad Kevin in my life at that point, and he was, not a sports person in any way, but he was the best mentor I could have ever had. Yeah. I had British Cycling, their knowledge, and bits of equipment, and off we went.
Yeah, and the rest is then sort of history, I suppose, in a way. I mean, I want to circle back to the Olympics a little bit whilst we're on that topic of your career, because London 2012. I mean, that was just such a incredible spectacle for Britain in sport generally, but particularly cycling as well. What was it like representing your country in the Olympics in your own country as well? How did that feel?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, prior to London, we had Beijing, and you kind of turned up as almost a plucky underdog at that point with the team, and you always remember your first. And then like London was different though. We had, again, it was a bit of a blessing and a curse. We had this like, wow, this is an amazing event. It's like your home Olympics. It's like the stuff you wouldn't have even dreamt about as a daft kid, making selection for the talent team. You had this like once in a lifetime opportunity to do something you'd still be talking about when you're nearly 40. And
probably forever, Ed, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to go away.
That's the thing, yeah. It's like everyone can relate to it. Everyone knew it was happening, and everyone spoke to you about it. Your teammates, your parents, the TV, the radio. You couldn't avoid this thing that everyone was talking about, and it did bring a lot of pressure with it at that point.
I can imagine, yeah. What does it take then mentally to kind of prepare yourself for something like that?
It takes everything is the short answer. For someone like me that wasn't, I wasn't Bradley Wiggins, I wasn't Geraint Thomas, I never had that physical gift. It took everything. There was no birthday parties, there was no Christmases, there was no funerals. You become very one-dimensional. Yeah. I just lived to be the best thing at riding around a big wooden track that I could. That's the only way I could do it.
Yeah. So how many hours a day of training did that take? I mean, you're saying you sort of didn't... Yeah. You sort of put your life on hold by sounds of it to do that.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, that was your life.
Yeah, it's difficult. As a young person in your 20s, you see your old friends going off and partying and doing fun things, and even starting families and so on, and realistically none of that was available to you. It's a very privileged position to be in, but for me the hardest thing wasn't the training, it wasn't the suffering, it was the things you couldn't do. It was like you kind of looked around and you're like, wow, I hope this is going to be worth it. In terms of hours of training, things like that, to answer your question, it was as much as you could tolerate. For me, in an endurance week, we'd do 20, 25 hours, which is probably less than Brad and Geraint. But because of my sort of physiology and my body type, I was a bit more of a sprinter than them. So I did more damage and I was slower to recover. And then in the sort of speed and strength phases, We might have only done 6 or 7 hours a week, but every pedal rev was like, everything you've got. And so that's what London 2012 looked like. But the emotions behind it were indescribable, really. You came from such a place of, honestly, I just worry and pressure. Not wanting to let your teammates down, not wanting to let yourself down, not wanting to mess up this once in a lifetime thing, to standing on this wooden box in front of like hundreds of millions of people on TV, being the best in the world, and it's that emotional acceleration that's kind of hard to describe. And
but then the feelings afterwards, I mean, that must have been a sense of relief, but incredible pride and joy as well, because you then went on to Rio and did it again. So
definitely,
it must have felt worth it.
It did. And in hindsight, it's the best way I could have misspent my youth. I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to do anything else. And I know it's a cliche, but I look back on the wins and the times that we really messed up, which is a lot of them. But I believe in the journey that sport took me on. I do different things in my life now, and I try to be useful in other walks of life. Everything I know and I've learnt now about the power of an effective team, about how to be disciplined, about having clarity on your goals, about trying to communicate well, all of that I learned through sport. And, for me, I couldn't have learnt that any other way, which is why I'm such a big believer in it.
Well, yeah, and that's something I want to touch on now is what you're up to now. Obviously, you've retired from cycling. Yeah. What's your role in the sport these days, Ed?
Yeah, so in sport, my role, I still work with British Cycling. I touched on earlier on a bit of consultancy work with triathlon around the bike stuff. I still work with British Cycling's research and innovation team, so developing the bikes, the skin suits in the wind tunnels, which is a big part of track cycling in particular. I do a bit of work with the events team, actually, with British Cycling these days. The boss, John Dutton, commissioned me to chair a task force to understand sort of the ups and downs, let's say, of the domestic road racing scene. The great town centre criterium here in Barnsley actually a few years ago, which should be great to bring back at some point, I think. You got the Tour of Britain finishing here in September.
Yes, just a big event. We'll touch on that as well.
Yeah, we'll get onto that, but that's amazing that's coming here to Barnsley.
Yeah.
So in terms of sport, that is what I do. But I also, as you know, spend time as the active travel commissioner here in South Yorkshire, which is amazing. And I guess it's one of those jobs that never saw coming, never thought about. And whilst it's definitely not the easiest job I've ever had, it's incredibly rewarding, and I really believe what it's about. And
what is it about? What do you do on your day-to-day life, and that's part of that role?
Yeah, so 50% of the role is trying to be a good spokesperson and a good ambassador for activity. And, a lot of active travel is sort of like integrating a degree of activity, walking, cycling, on your way to work, school, your commute. So that's part of it, being an ambassador and a spokesperson for it. And I'd say at least 50% is working behind the scenes with a team. And we have to pull together a strategy. And it's got to be a strategy that's meaningful, that the leaders want. Because if we don't have political will, we go nowhere.
Are these things like getting new cycle lanes, or is it? Do you go into schools and get people to learn to ride, or put on events on? Is that part of that role?
Yeah, exactly that. So we're going to events that currently exist. So we've been to a ramp up session in Barnsley.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I know.
Lots of them around. Yeah,
Sir Steve, the boss of Barnsley, he's really big on children. He really believes in the next generation and getting them active, and that's great. I love that too. And so we're trying to put a strategy together, that we can sit across all 4 local authorities that does, just that as well. We want to focus on schools. We want to focus on those communities that at times have probably felt like they've been left further behind other people. And that's important to remember. We know there's going to be a big return on investment if we do that. We know there's every reason to be thinking about our youth and engaging them early in not like Olympic sports, just a degree of activity. Yeah. I really believe in that inextricable link between physical and mental health. I think that's more important for the youth of today than ever. So in part, it's my job to work behind the scenes, put a strategy together with Nicola, our programme director, that sings to that. And ultimately, I need to find budget for that, and I've got to ask for that, so we can not just talk about it, not talk the talk. We can give people a real opportunity and capability to do that with safe infrastructure, not just bike lanes, but we're probably going to be talking more about walking, decent crossings outside school, neighbourhoods that are safe and inviting for children to play.
And like I say, there seems to be an appetite from it from above as well in Barnsley at the moment, particularly as well. How are you finding? Yeah, what do you think of Barnsley as a place for cycling and active travel in general?
Yeah, I think so. I don't want to speak for the boss, but I think there's a lot of energy around sort of schools and engaging schools in activity, which is great. And I very much want to try and play a part in doing that better. I think there's a lot of energy for the off-road trails around here in Barnsley, and that's not active travel in a traditional sense. Active travel in a traditional sense is building big segregated LTM 120 bike lanes next to a utility road. And for what it's worth, I definitely think that's got its place in the world. But if the energy is upskilling the beautiful off-road trails that we have in abundance around here, resurface them so they are usable and inviting for both commuters and leisure users, then great. I think we can go with that energy too, as long as they're open and accessible to everyone. So I mean, we did a South Yorkshire by bike ride. So just last week we did literally a tour of South Yorkshire, through every local authority, and Dean Valley Park, is it?
Oh, Dearne Valley, yeah.
Dearne Valley Park, sorry. It's a beautiful park that I'm ashamed to say I just didn't really know existed, but it's just amazing out there. And if we can open that up, make it even more accessible, friendly to use for everyone, put a spotlight on it, talk about it more.
I mean, Barnsley's we've got a new Visit Barnsley website now, which is going to highlight some of these amazing cycling trails that are around the borough. I mean, that's one of them. I think the Transpennine Trail, Barnsley probably has, I think, more of it than other areas in South Yorkshire as well. There's a fact behind that. I don't know the exact distance.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's amazing infrastructure for sort of off-road cycling and all that kind of stuff in Barnsley, isn't there?
It is, yeah. I often, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I live in Home Firth now, which is just across the border in West Yorkshire, and I very frequently get on my mountain bike. So I ride over a big hill on my electric mountain bike, get on the Transpennine Trail at Dunford Bridge, I ride all the way through Penistone. But that section of Transpennine Trail is really well used, particularly leisure users at the weekend, which is great to see. And to make my way to Warncliffe and Grenoside Woods, and enjoy some of the best biking trails in the country, and make my way back home. And I mean, again, a lot of the listeners probably, or the ones that do know of me or did know of me, would remember the sort of lycra-clad thing going around in circles on a wooden track. But now these days, I love my leisure cycling, I love my commuting, and to be frank, I'm more than happy to get away from busy main roads and cars.
Yeah, and there's plenty of opportunity, like you say, to do it here in Barnsley. And one thing we mentioned a little bit earlier to maybe inspire even more people to get into cycling is the Tour of Britain that's coming here in September. So not far away. How big is that to anyone that's going, well, I don't know what that is. What is the Tour of Britain? How big is it in cycling terms to come here to Barnsley? You're
right. So a bit of background first. I mean, like, the domestic road racing scene has had to be honest, quite a significant dip. We had this like sort of glory period really off the back of 2012 and 2016 Olympics, and Brad winning the Tour and Geraint winning the Tour, and then we went into coronavirus, and then we went into a cost of living crisis, and a lot of events businesses struggled financially and aren't here anymore. And now the Tour of Britain is once again back within British Cycling's control. British Cycling have just landed a major corporate partner that have signed up for a significant amount of money over a significant period of time. We've got a new CEO in British Cycling who's, from what I've heard, universally loved and approved. And I think he's been a big part of the solution. Again, the Tour of Britain's back. It's the biggest domestic race we have on the calendar. It invites, so many major cyclists and teams these days. I don't know if it is this year, but traditionally it's been ahead of the World Championship, so it always attracts like so many superstars. And it's a huge event, and it's starting in Sheffield and finishing in Barnsley on Thursday.
Stage 3 is, yes.
Is it?
In 5th. can't say
Is it
the word.
5th of September? Yeah, it's massive. It's
finishing
massive.
not very close to this building that we're in right now, actually. So.
Amazing, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great city centre. It's great to put a positive spotlight on everything that, talking about the upbringing, this place has been completely transformed since I was a kid, completely transformed. And the Tour of Britain, the event itself is amazing. Now, what's probably even more exciting than that, in my opinion, is that both the boss of British Cycling and everyone I speak to in the council here in Barnsley is aware of the fact we don't just want an event in an ideal world to turn up and go. We want to leave a lasting legacy of engaged people, young and old, that want to get out and ride bikes or be healthy and active. And I think certainly in 12 months' time, if this ever happens again, I think the Tour of Britain and the events team at British Cycling have got a real desire to not just have an event that comes and goes, but to sort of build up excitement and interest in and around schools in the area, to create a big landing patch for it, and then to create a real lasting legacy off the back of it, which is pretty cool as well.
I think we've had a great response from schools about it coming here as well. Amazing, many are so keen to get involved and stand out on the roadside and kind of support the cyclists as they come past. So it's going to be a momentous day for Barnsley, I think.
I love it. And these days I have to work with I said that in like a begrudging way. These days, I
have to work with.
I work with behaviour change models. So it's like, how do you get people to change behaviour? And there's 3 parts of this triangle, and you have capability, opportunity, and motivation. Now, when we talk about capability and opportunity, we've sort of say, right, well, is a child capable of riding a bike? That's kind of like a yes or no answer. Is somebody a ramp-up session? Can they learn how to ride a bike at a ramp-up session that gives them the capability? The second part of this triangle, opportunity. Do they have a place where they have opportunity at the weekends to go ride the bike and, act upon this capability? And the third part of this triangle, motivation. In my opinion, that's where the big events like the Tour of Britain comes in. What's more motivating and inspiring to...
I know, to have it on your doorstep as well.
I think it's ace, It still works for me, and I'm an old man now.
But you've been involved with events in Barnsley as well yourself. We were just talking a bit before we started recording that you were involved in the What's Your Move Day down in the town centre with all the ramp-up sessions. And what was it like being a part of that as well, and seeing all the kids taking part and just enjoying sport and cycling in particular? Yeah,
really good, actually. I tell you what, I remember Barnsley vaguely, when I was a kid.
Yeah. Did you come in much?
Yeah, I did. I mean, these sort of very distant memories, from really early life. My age was still in single digits, but
you just cycled through, didn't you? You didn't see much of it.
I dare say I'd been here with my mum, sort of visiting friends and people, and little shopping days out, whatever it was, and I remember turning up here to a bike race. Probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago now. The Barnsley Town Centre Criterium.
Yeah.
It was organised by a pal of mine, and it was an amazing event. But what I was really quite taken back by, we turned up in the big team bus and we parked just outside the council office. And wow, it's nice here. And I left the boys and the team alone. I just went for a little bit of a lonely stroll around the centre just to kind of reminisce. And I was like, I just don't even recognise this place anymore. It's just totally different. We've got the glassworks over there and the light box and everything. And I was like, wow, it just looks great. And so that was my reflections on Barnsley, and I can't remember what your question was, but the whole place.
It was about the events. I know.
Yeah, the events there was great, and you're right. That's your question. We turned up there, and there's a fellow called Stuart that works in the council. That's so passionate about, what he does, the ramp up sessions, and as you'd expect, I just resorted to being a massive kid and had a good time on my mountain bike on the ramps myself.
We've taken a nice photo of you on that day because you still use it. You walk down the Glassworks Boulevard now. There's just you on a mountain bike. I think just it's inspiring. It
was great. It's a great pedestrianised town centre. It's super friendly for walkers in particular, and that's really important. There's loads of great cafes in and around, some nice shops, beautiful areas to sit, some water fountains and things like that. It's a great place. I mean, this place is totally different now to it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. We talked about how cycling sort of helps mental health.
Yeah.
But what's it like in terms of, I suppose, making friends as well and getting into a community of cyclists? Is there benefits to that as well, that side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know what people think sports people are like at school. I think often people think of like the school alpha male or the jock. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that for me. To be honest, I was a quiet person, almost a loner, a bit of a fringe. You know what I mean? And like with every sport, you find people that are like-minded. You find a place of belonging, and with every and any sport, there's nothing, in my experience, that'll bond a team like collective adversity, and that's what bike racing is. You know, even at a club level, you'll sort of turn up to an event. You'll have your teammates. It might be from the Home Valley Wheelers or whatever it is, and you know, you'll all have a little team talk together, and you'll go through this race, and you'll struggle, and it'll rain, and someone will have a crash, and you get to the end, and you're all tired and worn out, but you'll have some stories that you'll tell your grandkids one day. And yeah, in any walk of life, actually, you know, nothing will bond a team like collective adversity and overcoming adversity, and that's what sport is. And yeah, it's probably worth saying on the sort of community front that, you know, my career wasn't just started by British cycling. It was started by people in community coaches, teachers that had an interest in cycling, people in the communities, or volunteers. Volunteers now still prop up sport and leisure activities, you know. There'll be people working at the Tour of Britain that are volunteers that aren't there getting paid at that level. And yeah, if it's worth anything coming out of my mouth, in the last 3 years in retirement, I've spent more time working with events and events organisers with British cycling, and I never showed enough gratitude to those people, and because there's a difference between champions.
Thank them now, Ed.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, yeah, because there's a difference between champions and heroes. A champion is someone that surpasses world records and beats other people. There's nothing honourable or noble about that. A hero is different to a champion. A hero it's an unremarkable, sober act. It's about serving. It's about serving your community, serving people. And yeah, heroes are bigger than champions. I can see that now. So yeah.
The other thing I wanted to touch on, do you think there's still, I mean, you're going to say yes, you're involved very heavily in it, but is there still that sense of eagerness to cycle across Britain, do you think? I mean, from London 2012 and the Rio Olympic, there was kind of this golden age of cycling, if you like, then. And I felt it was everywhere. And we had things like the Tour de Yorkshire come here, the Tour de France started here, I think, didn't it? And there's that big thing. Has it dropped off, or is there still that real passion and appetite for cycling in Britain, do you think?
Good question. And I've seen conflicting evidence, actually. I've seen numbers that suggest that both in a racing sense and a commuting sense, like numbers have dwindled. And I've also seen evidence that would suggest that we're still riding that crest of the wave, if you like. I suspect the truth's probably somewhere in the middle, and numbers have slightly dropped off. But that's okay. I mean, it was a golden era. We had the Home Olympics. We had every reason to be inspired and motivated. That doesn't mean that we can't get back to that and be bigger and better and bolder and braver than ever before. I mean, he used to say that in the next 5, 6, 7 years, we can't. Remember when we had the Tour de France over here? You know, I mean, the Home Olympics is probably off the cards for a while, but I don't think, got no reason to think they are coming, but why not?
Yeah.
I think we've got the energy there now. I think British cycling's in a great place. I do hope that the upper echelons of government even can see the benefit in that, and also the need not just to have big inspirational events, but also underpin that, you know, for the recreational rider, for the commuter, give them capability and opportunity to act on that inspiration. Like, that's important too. And yeah, it's a big, complicated beast, but why not?
I think there is still an appetite. I mean, there's the new cycle shop actually just opened on Eldon Street in Barnsley recently.
Oh, yeah.
J.E. James. So, you know, if a new shop wants to open up in the town centre, like that, it's three floors, they've got giant bikes in there and everything. So there's clearly an appetite to cycle.
I probably shouldn't admit this, but we started walking the wrong way from the centre, and we walked past it, and it was it was amazing. It's great to see that. And J.E. James, we've got a great reputation. They've got shops in other local authorities around here in South Yorkshire, and yeah, they're obviously, again, like, you know, the cycle trade has struggled the last 2 or 3 years, and that's been out there in the cycling press. But it's great to see people in here in Barnsley riding bikes. Hence, they've opened a shop, and I'm sure they'll do well.
Just finally, Ed, on the Olympics, how many medals we're going to win in the velodrome?
You know what? I don't know in terms of a
by the time
number.
this goes out, it'll have happened. So we can see if your prediction's right.
I tell you what, I'll keep it somewhat vague because I just don't know in terms of numbers. But I do think across the board, so not necessarily the velodrome, I think they're always going to struggle to, we had the whole marginal gains package, we were ahead of the world with Chris Soy, Vicky Pendleton, all that. But I think when you look at mountain bike, BMX freestyle, time trial, Anna Henderson got a silver medal there, the road racing, I think British cycling will do as good as they've ever done. When you look at cycling across the entire spectrum, yeah.
Perfect. That's the happy note that we needed to end on. Thanks for joining us today. I'd really, really enjoyed our chat.
Cheers, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate. Thanks.